which seem to come down the pipeline with astonishing regularity. The only real way to get rich dependably is to get rich slowly. It's hard work, and it takes a long time to accumulate wealth, but you're foolish to seek for faster and easier ways. The second part of the law of risk says that success in wealth creation is the result of avoiding risk in the pursuit of profit. The fact is that entrepreneurs are not risk takers, as is commonly believed. Rather, successful entrepreneurs are risk avoiders. They're very skillful at sidestepping and avoiding risk in the pursuit of adding value and earning profits. It's only to the degree to which you avoid the risks inherent in any economic activity that you become wealthy. The third part of the law of risk says that entrepreneurs take calculated risks, but they are not gamblers. Extensive research on the psychology and patterns of behavior of successful entrepreneurs shows that because they work hard for their money, they have no desire to gamble it away. Entrepreneurs accept that there's a certain amount of risk in anything they do. However, they believe that they can tip the scales to their own advantage. They can moderate the risk by adding their knowledge, skills, and ability to the equation. They are willing to take gambles only when they can personally have an effect on the outcome. You seldom see entrepreneurs in the gambling resorts, and you seldom find them trading in the stock market. If they're in the stock market at all, they have investment portfolios where they store their excess funds for the long term. Their funds are carefully allocated among blue-chip stocks and are supervised by professional money managers. If you ask the average self-made millionaire how the stock market did today, he will tell you quite frankly that he doesn't know. They don't follow the stock market because they're not interested in day-to-day fluctuations. The ninth law of wealth creation is called the law of undue optimism, and it's essential for both entrepreneurship and the creation of wealth. It says, an unwarranted expectancy of success can lead to both the success and failure of a new business venture. Excess optimism is absolutely essential for a person to embark on a new business adventure of any kind. Without undue optimism, without an extremely positive feeling that you'll be successful, you'll have a tendency to play it too safe, as most people do. In order to get started in the first place, you need an attitude of hopefulness and positive expectancy that is much higher than the average. However, this same undue optimism can lead to self-delusion and unreal expectations. So you need to temper your optimism with reality. You need to examine every aspect of the business before you commit your resources to it. You need to seek out the advice of other people who may not be as positive towards your idea as you are, and consider what they have to say carefully before you act. The first part of this law says that the true time period for you to break even will be 3 times longer than your best estimate. Once you've written out your business plan, you should triple your very best estimate of your break-even point and make sure that you have the resources to continue operating that long. Practice frugality at all times and conserve your cash above all else when starting on any new venture. The second part of the law of undue optimism is, whatever your budget is for your venture, it will cost you twice as much as you expect. So be conservative in projecting your sales and revenues, and be liberal, even excessive, in estimating your costs. Always calculate your expenses on the outside, at the highest you can imagine, and when you have them all added up, then add another 20% as a fudge factor to get a more realistic picture of what your financial costs are likely to be. If you exceed your financial results and you do better than you expect, that's wonderful. But practice caution and pessimism in your financial projections to start with. The third part of the law of undue optimism is called Murphy's Law, which you've heard of before. It says, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. An addition to this law says that of all the possible things that can go wrong, the worst possible thing will go wrong at the worst possible time, and it will cost you the greatest amount of money. People who start their own businesses are convinced, at least initially, that they're going to violate these laws and succeed in spite of them. People who succeed, however, are those who conform to these laws and who have stopped trying to beat them. The 10th law of wealth creation is the law of persistence. It says that if you persist long enough, you must inevitably be successful. Persistence is to the quality of man as carbon is to steel. Your persistence is your measure of your belief in yourself. Persistence is your self-discipline in action. It's your ability to persist that is often your most valuable asset. The first part of the law of persistence says that the entire process of wealth creation is just one important lesson after another. If ever you feel that you've reached the point where you know everything that you need to know, in no time at all you're going to be blindsided by a completely new and unexpected series of problems and difficulties. Mark my words. The second part of the law of persistence says that you stay in business and you achieve success as long as you continue to earn enough money to pay for your mistakes. The freedom to fail is what gives you the opportunity to succeed. You are learning all the time. When you have experiences, either positive or negative, you will learn from them, and what you learn will enable you to win in the end. By the law of accumulation, which I talked about in an earlier session, your ultimate success will be an accumulation of hundreds and even thousands of small actions on your part that gradually add up to a form of critical mass that enables you to create and keep the wealth for which you're working. Perhaps the most important thing you can do is to take time every day to think about your goals and to reflect quietly on the things that you've done right and the things that you would do differently in the future. Remember, action without thinking is the cause of every failure. Financial wealth is within your grasp. Hundreds of thousands of men and women have acquired it in the past, and you can acquire it in the future if you do the same things they did and if you learn the same lessons. The only real limitation on your potential is the level of your desire and the strength of your willingness to persist in the face of adversity. When you set a clear goal, develop a written plan, put your plan into action, and back your actions with determination and perseverance, you must and will eventually be successful. You will become one of the leading men or women of your generation. Everyone makes their living selling something to someone. Everyone is paid both tangibly and intangibly on the basis of how well they sell themselves, their ideas, and their products and services to others. It's not a matter of whether you sell or not, it's only a matter of how good you are at it. Parents, for example, are continually selling values, attitudes, and behaviors to their children, and their children will grow up straight and strong to the degree to which the parents have been good at this job. The very best managers and leaders are invariably described as excellent, low-pressure salespeople. Since people don't like to be told, taught, or talked down to, the most successful human relations experts are those who can present an idea in such a way that the other person will embrace it as his own. President Dwight D. Eisenhower once said that the art of leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do and to think of it as their own idea. In business and industry, and in work and in organizations, you're paid largely on your ability to sell the quality of your work to the people who determine your success in your career. Many people market themselves both aggressively and effectively in their careers, and they move ahead far more rapidly than others who don't, even though they may not be more talented and they may not be producing more or better work. It's all in the selling. Many people are uneasy about the word selling, including many salespeople. But the fact is that the ability to persuade and influence others is central to a happy life. The opposite to influencing and persuading others to your point of view is having no ability to influence or to persuade others, or to be merely a passive agent in the flow of events. People who can't get others to go along with them have very little influence and aren't very highly respected. But people who have developed the ability to be persuasive and convincing in their arguments, on the other hand, are some of the most respected and the most successful people in our society. The ability to sell well is one of the rarest talents in America. Top salespeople are some of the best paid, most respected, and most secure of all professionals. So, whether you are a customer, a manager, a salesperson, or anyone else, you owe it to yourself to become excellent at selling whatever you sell to other people. To speak specifically of the sales profession, according to the Pareto principle, the top 20% of salespeople sell 80% of the business and earn 80% of the money. Research shows that the top 10% of salespeople open 80% of the new accounts and are some of the highest paid people in the world of business. Wonderfully enough, there's more research available on selling and how to do it effectively today than there ever has been at any other time in human history. Today, we know more about how to succeed in selling than ever before, and that's what we'll cover in this session. Selling involves three essential factors. First comes the product or service. Then comes the salesperson, and then the customer. All three must be ideally suited to each other for a sale to take place. Let me explain. The product or service must be right for the customer, but it also must be right for the salesperson if he or she is going to sell it to the customer. Some salespeople are excellent at selling one type of product or service, and some salespeople are excellent at another. It has very little to do with the product or service itself. It often has to do with the temperament, personality, values, and attitude of the salesperson. You see, it's very hard to sell something that you can't put your whole heart into. Many people have found that by changing products or services, they've gone to the top of their industries, whereas before they were merely spinning their wheels. The starting point of sales success, then, is to make sure that these three factors are in place, that this is the right product or service for you to be selling to the right customer, the one you most enjoy working with. There are 13 laws that apply to sales that you can use to enable yourself to be far more effective and successful. The first is the law of sales, which says nothing happens until a sale takes place. These words come from the great salesman and sales trainer Red Motley. The fact is that a sale is what initiates the entire production process. It activates the factories and provides employment for the workers. It pays salaries and wages. It pays taxes and dividends. And it determines the entire direction of society. Whenever sales are good in any economy, the economy is strong and full of opportunities for growth and prosperity. The very first thing to slow down when the economy begins to soften is the level of sales. The first part of the law of sales says that products and services are sold, not bought. No matter how good a product or service is, in a competitive market and with customers who are busy and preoccupied with many other things, products and services must ultimately be sold, and they require someone to sell them. The skill of selling is therefore one of the guarantors of a happy and prosperous life. The second part of this law says that customers need to be asked to buy. No matter how much a customer likes you or your product, there's always a certain amount of indecision or hesitation at the point of buying, and it's the job of the professional salesperson to help the customer through this difficult moment into the enjoyment of owning and using the product or service. The third part of this law says that 80% of sales are closed after the fifth call or after the fifth closing attempt. In complex sales, which are sales involving several people and several meetings with a client, most sales are closed after the fifth meeting or interaction. In simple sales, which are sales requiring only a single meeting with the client or customer, most sales are closed after the fifth time that the salesperson asks the customer to make a buying decision. It's therefore essential that the salesperson plans the close of the sales conversation in advance and has a variety of different ways to ask for the order. The fourth part of this law says that 50% of salespeople quit after the first call in a complex sale, and 50% of salespeople fail to ask for the order even once in a simple sale. For example, a sales organization I worked with sent out consultants with their salespeople and found that the salespeople were asking for the order an average of 4 times per sales conversation, and their sales weren't very high. They then taught the salespeople to ask for the order at least 5 times in each sales conversation, and their sales doubled within the next 30 days. Very often, each time you ask a customer to make a decision, the customer draws closer to making the final decision. Sadly enough, many salespeople quit when the sale is just within reach by failing to ask for the order one more time. The 5th part of the law of sales comes from the New Testament teaching, which says, "Ask and ye shall receive." There's no miracle to success in selling. Top salespeople just see more people and ask more often. If you want to join the top ranks of sales professionals in your field, you must simply increase your frequency of contact with your customers. Let me tell you another story. A large company in California paid many thousands of dollars to bring in an outside consulting firm to find out why their sales were down. They found that their salespeople had begun to drift in their sales activities, and they were only making 4 customer contacts per week. Immediately upon discovering this, they instituted a control procedure which required that each salesperson meet face-to-face with at least 10 customers per week. Their sales jumped 50% during the very first month. They proved again that no amount of training or skill can replace the need to get head-to-head and knee-to-knee with customers. The second law of selling is the law of ambition, which says, how high you rise is largely determined by how high you want to climb. How far you go in your field, how much money you earn is not determined solely by external factors. It's determined more by internal factors. It's more often determined by your level of desire and ambition. The first part of the law of ambition says, commit to being the best in your field. The commitment to excellence in your field of selling, more than anything else, will propel you onward and upward and will assure you of great success. All top salespeople got there only after they'd made a firm decision to be the best at what they were doing. The second part of the law of ambition says that to achieve high sales goals, you have to set them in the first place. The starting point of great success in selling is for you to decide how much you want to earn each year, and then to decide how much you're going to have to sell in order to earn it. Break your annual sales goals down into monthly goals, weekly goals, and even daily goals. Then, divide your annual income goal by the number 250, which represents the number of working days in an average year, to determine how much you want to earn each day. Divide your daily earnings goal by 8 to determine how much you want to earn per hour. From that moment onward, never do anything that doesn't pay you your desired hourly rate. For example, if you wanted to earn $50,000 a year, dividing that number by 250 would give you $200 per day or $25 per hour for an 8-hour day. From then on, never do anything that you wouldn't pay someone else $25 per hour to do. Don't drop off your dry cleaning or pick up your groceries or socialize on the telephone. These activities don't pay $25 per hour. And if you don't do $25 per hour work, 8 hours a day, it's impossible by the law of cause and effect for you ever to earn $50,000 per year. That's why all top salespeople are extremely well-disciplined in the way they use their time, hour by hour throughout the working day. The third part of the law of ambition says that you can't fly with the eagles if you continue to scratch with the turkeys. This line comes from Zig Ziglar, and it says that in order for you to be the best in your field, you must associate with the best people in your field. At the same time, you must get away from the 80% of salespeople who are going nowhere. Most top salespeople tend to be loners, in that they find in order to keep themselves positive and motivated and focused on their work, they've got to stay away from the great majority of other salespeople who are not. It's essential that you discipline yourself in this area, and if you want to be a top salesperson, you must get around other top salespeople. The third law of selling is the law of need. which says that every decision to purchase a product or service is an attempt to satisfy a need or relieve a dissatisfaction. One of the most important things you do in successful selling is to put yourself in the shoes of your prospect and see your offering through his or her eyes. The first part of the law of need says that before selling anything to anyone, the salesperson must be clear about the need that he or she is attempting to satisfy. Good salespeople are very good at asking questions and listening intently to the answers. This enables them to focus in on satisfying the most important and pressing needs of the customer with their product or service. The second part of the law of need says that sales success comes from fulfilling existing needs, not creating new ones. Your job is to uncover the needs that already exist, not to attempt to convince a person that they have needs that they may not have thought of in the first place. The third part of the law of need says that the more basic the need, the more basic the sales presentation. For example, if you're selling potatoes, which caters to the need for food, you can sell them very simply by size and weight. Your sales appeal will be to appetite and attractiveness. Your basis of comparison with other foodstuffs will be simple and straightforward. However, the fourth part of this law, the converse of the third part, says that the more complex the need, the more sophisticated and subtle must be the sales presentation. For example, if you're selling perfume to ladies, your advertising and sales approach must be very low-keyed and gentle. Perfume is a delicate subject, used delicately, and is only sold when the salesperson can structure the appeal in such a way that it connects with deep inner needs for beauty and self-realization. The fifth part of the law of need says that the obvious need is often not the real need upon which the product will be purchased. Never assume that you know the need. Each customer is different. The need that caused one customer to buy may not be the same for another customer. If you structure your appeal to the wrong need, you'll be unsuccessful in the sales process. Again, the very best salespeople are very sensitive and attentive to their customers, and they don't even begin to attempt to sell until they're absolutely clear what it is the customer is really interested in buying. The fourth law of selling is the law of problems. This law says that every product or service can be viewed as the solution to a problem, the fulfillment of a need, or the resolution of an uncertainty. As a salesperson, you are basically a professional problem solver. People get from where they are to where they want to go by means of your product or service. The first part of the law of problems says that customers buy solutions, not products or services. A business person, for example, is interested in increasing productivity or sales, decreasing costs, and increasing bottom-line profits. The business person doesn't care if you're selling hula hoops or mainframe computers, really. The business person is interested in his or her problem and a possible solution to it, not your product or service or your desire to sell it. When you begin to perceive yourself as a professional problem solver rather than as a salesperson, your success with your customers will go up dramatically. The second part of the law of problems says that the more pressing the problem or need, the less price-sensitive the customer will be, and the easier the sale. If a person really needs or can benefit from purchasing a product or service, the customer's concern about price and timing will diminish. If a person is really hungry, he or she will pay a lot to eat. Your job in the sales conversation is to increase the level of the customer's desire for the benefits and enjoyment of your product or service to the point where the price is not a major obstacle to proceeding. The fifth law of selling is the law of persuasion, which says that the process of selling is to convince the customer that he will be better off with the product than he would be with the money necessary to buy the product. You're asking the customer to engage in a trade. You're telling the customer that if the customer gives you their money, the product or service that you will supply will be of greater value to him than either the money or anything else the customer could buy with that same amount of money at the same time. Remember the law of the excluded alternative. Every choice implies a rejection. When you ask a customer to buy from you and to exchange part of his or her limited amount of money, you're asking the customer to forego all other pleasures and satisfactions that are available to the customer with the same amount of money at the same time. And this is a big question. The first part of the law of persuasion is that the customer always acts to satisfy the greatest number of unmet needs in the very best way at the lowest possible price. A major part of your job is to demonstrate that the customer will get more of what he wants faster by purchasing your product or service than the customer would get if the customer either kept the money or bought something else. The second part of the law of persuasion says, proof that others similar to the customer have purchased the product already builds credibility, lowers resistance, and increases sales. Every piece of information that you can present in a sales conversation that shows the customer that other people similar to the customer have already wrestled with this buying decision and decided to go ahead and have been happy as a result moves you closer to making the sale. The third part of the law of persuasion says, half-jokingly, that salespeople who don't use testimonials have skinny kids. Testimonial letters, photos of happy customers using and enjoying your product or service, or lists of satisfied customers are extraordinarily powerful influence factors in persuading a person to buy. You must take full advantage of testimonials and acquire them from every source possible and in every way you possibly can. They can make your sales work much easier. You'll find that all top salespeople get there by using testimonials tied directly into the customer they're talking with and the product or services that they're selling. The sixth law of selling is the law of risk, which says that risk is inherent in any investment of time, money, or emotion. Risk is an unavoidable and an inescapable fact of life, and we're always taking actions in every way possible to reduce risk. This is the entire essence of the insurance industry, as I mentioned before. Insurance is simply a way of pooling risks by taking premiums from a large number of people in order to cover the losses that will be suffered by a small number of them. Insuring yourself properly can give you a tremendous sense of inner peace because of the reduction of risk that you feel. The first part of the law of risk says that you're successful in sales to the degree to which you can position yourself as the low-risk provider of your product or service. This is one of the most important concepts in selling and something that you need to build into all of your sales efforts. Many sales fail to materialize because the customer doesn't feel that she'll be safe in the use, enjoyment, or follow-up service and maintenance of your product or service. So you must build this idea of low-risk supplier into every sales presentation. The second part of the law of risk says that the primary psychological obstacle to buying is the fear of failure, the fear of making a mistake in a purchasing decision. The fear of failure is one of the most powerful of all inhibitors of human action. The fear of failure in buying is rooted in previous experiences. Perhaps the customer bought a product that didn't work, or purchased a product or service that ended up costing too much. Since everyone has had bad buying experiences, everyone is conditioned to be cautious and fearful about having those experiences again. This fear of failure is a major psychological block that you must overcome before a purchase decision can be made. The third part of the law of risk simply says that everything you do in a sales interview either raises or lowers the perception of risk and the fear of failure. Because you're asking a person to part with his money and to risk his ego in a sales situation, the purchasing decision is charged with emotion. Everything about you is either adding to or detracting from the perception of risk and uncertainty on the part of the customer. In a sales situation, especially a larger sale, nothing is neutral. Everything counts. Everything that you do is either moving you toward the sale or moving you away from the sale. Never allow yourself the luxury of saying, "Oh, that doesn't matter." everything matters. Everything counts. Everything is either adding up or taking away. Your job is to make sure that everything you do or say is helpful in some way, in that it lowers the perception of risk and raises the perception of security. The seventh law of selling is the law of trust, one of the most important of all laws in selling. It says that the trust bond between the salesperson and the customer is the foundation of a successful sale. The higher the level of trust between you and your prospective customer, the lower will be the fear of failure and the perception of risk. The first part of the law of trust says that you build trust in a sales relationship by asking questions aimed at the real needs of the customer that your product or service can satisfy. Many salespeople don't realize that an endless series of questions aimed at the customer's life and situation may be of interest temporarily, but these questions don't build the level of trust. It's only when you ask penetrating questions aimed at the real needs of the customer that your product or service can solve that the customer warms to you and begins to trust you and believe in you. The second part of the law of trust says that successful salespeople listen twice as much as they talk. They practice what is called the 70-30 rule. They listen 70% or more of the time, and they talk 30% or less. It's been said often that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and in a sales conversation you should use them in that proportion. The best salespeople are superb listeners. Many of them are introverts and not particularly gregarious or outgoing. They're also extremely effective. The third part of the law of trust says that no one ever listened themselves out of a sale. In many cases, if you listen intently enough, if you listen patiently, and if you listen as though there were nothing else in the world more important than the words of the customer at that particular moment, you'll listen yourself into more sales than you can imagine. The fourth part of this law, which is as important as anything that you'll ever learn in selling, is that listening builds trust. There's no better and faster way to build trust between two people than for one to listen to the other. This is true in all relationships. You always like the people best who listen to you the most attentively when you want or need to talk about something that's important to you. Customers are the same. The eighth law of selling is the law of relationships. Applied to sales, it says that success in selling is determined by the ability of the salesperson to form a quality relationship with the customer. Dr. Theodore Levitt of the Harvard Business School, in his book, The Marketing Imagination, explains how marketing and selling has changed over the last few years. He points out that today in selling, because of risk and because of uncertainty and the variety of options available to the customer, the relationship is central. The first part of this law says that the customer wants a relationship first. Before a customer will seriously consider a complex offer of any kind, the customer wants to be sure that he can rely upon the salesperson and the company to fulfill their commitments after the money has changed hands. The second part of this law says that in complex sales, the relationship continues after the sale. Before the customer buys a product or service, the customer is largely independent of the salesperson and the company. The customer doesn't need them in any way. However, once the customer has made a buying decision, the customer then becomes dependent upon the warranties and assurances given by the company for the satisfactory use and enjoyment of the product. Because the relationship continues after the sale and often lasts as long as the customer uses the product or service, the decision to purchase a product or service means the decision to enter into a long-term relationship with the individual and the organization. The third part of the law of relationships in selling says that the relationship is more important than the product or service. Customers largely view products or services as commodities, available from several sources. Because of this, the customer has to decide among competing suppliers, and the decision is almost invariably made on the basis of which salesperson and company the customer feels most comfortable forming a business relationship with. Because relationships are so important in selling, the salesperson should tell the customer very clearly that his philosophy and the philosophy of the company is to enter into a long-term relationship and to maintain that relationship throughout the period of time that the customer will be using the product or service. The most successful salespeople and the most successful companies are those who establish long-term relationships with good customers. They then make every effort to maintain the quality of that relationship through care, attentiveness, sensitivity, dependability, and fast follow-up to complaints and requests, plus excellent service and maintenance. The ninth law of selling is the law of friendship. This is often called the friendship factor, and it says that a person will not buy from you until he is convinced that you are his friend and acting in his best interests. The undeniable fact is that all successful business relationships of any kind are built on friendships between the parties. A good salesperson is really an excellent friend maker. He has an easy ability to turn strangers into friends wherever he goes. He's relaxed, likable, and interested in other people. Other people like him, and in liking him, they want to do business with him. We always prefer to do business with the people we like, and we're psychologically constructed in such a way that we cannot and will not buy from people that we don't like, even if we want the product or service. The more business friendships you have, all things being equal, the more successful you'll be and the more money you'll earn in the field of selling. The 10th law of selling is the law of positioning, which says that the customer's perception of you and your company are his reality and determine his buying behavior. In their excellent book called Positioning, the Battle for Your Mind, authors Reese and Trout point out that every product or service either has or must gain a position in the mind of the customer for that customer to be able to make any kind of a buying decision on it. With proper positioning, your product or service can be seen by the customer as the generic product next to which others are merely substitutes or duplicates. Some examples of excellent positioning are Coca-Cola, Kleenex, and Xerox. In each case, these have become names for both the company and the product, but they're considered by most customers to be the product itself. The first part of the law of positioning says that every element of dress, product, packaging, printing, and promotion creates a perception of some kind. The second part of the law of positioning says that top salespeople position themselves as the preferred choice suppliers of their products and services. In many cases, the customer will pay substantially more for the identical product or service for the simple reason that it is you who are selling it and backing it up. Your position in the customer's mind can be so strong that no other competitor can get to the customer and replace you. The 11th law of selling is the law of perspective, which says that the way that you are viewed by your customers determines your income. This law says that how you are known to your customers, how you are thought about and talked about by your customers when you're not there, largely determines your level of income and your success in selling. The first part of the law of perspective says that when you're viewed by the customer as working for him or her, you'll be in the top 10% of your field. Many thousands of customers who buy from the top salespeople have been interviewed extensively about their buying habits and their reasons for selecting one salesperson over another. The most common reason that they give is that they feel that the salesperson really works for them rather than for their own company. The customers feel that the salesperson cares more about their needs than about making a sale or satisfying the demands of the company that pays their salary. A very good question for you to ask continually is, how would it be useful for me to be viewed by my customers? If you were a fly on the wall and one of your customers was telling one of your prospects about you, what would you want the customer to say? Whatever it is, be sure that everything that you do in your interaction with each customer leaves him or her mentally prepared to say those things about you when you're not present. The second part of the law of perspective says that top money earners in sales are viewed as consultants, helpers, counselors, and advisors to their customers, but not as salespeople. Another finding of the research into the perceptions of customers is that they looked upon the people that they bought from as people who were dedicated to helping them solve their problems or achieve their goals. The 12th law of selling is the law of preparation, which both follows from and precedes everything that I've talked about up to now about successful selling. This law says that the best salespeople prepare thoroughly before every call. This is so simple that it's often overlooked. The hallmark of the true professional, however, is thorough and exhaustive preparation over and over again before every competition. The very best salespeople are those who work on their presentations, on their product knowledge, and their materials repeatedly throughout their sales careers and prior to every new sales contact. You can't imagine a top athlete who didn't train continually before every competition. In fact, the period of training for an athlete consumes far, far more time than the actual competition itself. In every field of endeavor, it's the most thoroughly trained and dedicated professionals who rise to the top. The first part of the law of preparation says that the salesperson with the best knowledge of the real situation of the customer will be most likely to make the sale. The more time you take to thoroughly understand your prospective customer and your prospective customer's situation, the more likely it is that you will be in a position to sell at the critical moment. The second part of the law of preparation says that sales professionals plan their questions in advance. There's a direct relationship between the quality of the problem-focused questions that you ask a customer and the likelihood of a sale taking place. The only way that you can assure that your questions are penetrating and exact is by writing them out word for word in advance. For example, Ben Feldman, a salesman for the New York Life Insurance Company who was written up in the Guinness Book of Records as the top salesman of all time, used to spend 2 hours every single night reviewing and rehearsing his materials so that he would be sharp and well prepared the next day. In his famous book, The Feldman Method, author Andrew Thompson explains that Ben Feldman's success was largely due to his ability to ask the right questions at the right time. He found that a properly worded question could turn a neutral or negative prospect into an interested customer, sometimes in just a few seconds. The third part of the law of preparation says that the salesperson with the best notes and the best preparation wins. You need to think your call objectives through in advance of meeting the client. Write down and itemize exactly what you hope to accomplish on each visit. After the call, take careful notes and write down everything on the same sheet. Never rely on your memory. There's a Chinese saying which says, "The palest ink is stronger than the most powerful memory." Prior to every sales call, no matter how many times you may have visited the same customer, take a few minutes to review the customer's file, the customer's situation, and your own notes on what's taken place in the past. The top salespeople in every field prepare exhaustively prior to selling, prior to their presentations, and prior to closing. They think everything through in advance, and they leave nothing to chance. Remember, it's the details that make the difference. Finally, the 13th law of selling is the law of perverse motivation. This law says that everyone likes to buy, but no one likes to be sold. People don't like to feel that they're the recipients or the victims of a sales presentation. Most customers are very independent in their minds, and they don't like the thought that they are being manipulated or pressured or coerced into anything. They like to feel as though they're making up their own minds based on good information that's been presented to them. The first part of the law of perverse motivation says simply that the best salesperson is perceived as a person who helps the prospect get what he or she wants and needs. The second part of the law of perverse motivation says that top salespeople are teachers who show their customers how products work to satisfy their needs. If ever your customer feels, even for a moment, that you're trying to sell them into buying something, they'll instantly resist. As selling is something that you do to a person rather than for a person. And since the most important part of selling is the quality of the trust bond that exists between you and the customer, you can't afford to do anything that threatens it. Finally, remember that all things are possible to the salesperson who knows what he's doing, believes in what he's doing, and loves what he's doing. If you're selling the right product or service with the right organization to the right people, your future can be unlimited. Most of your possibilities for success and achievement in life will come by owning or working for private business organizations. President Calvin Coolidge once said that the business of America is business. There are more than 18 million businesses in the United States today, and somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million new businesses are being formed every year. These businesses run the entire gamut, from the smallest sole proprietorship working off a kitchen table to the largest corporate organization employing hundreds of thousands of people. Our business system is very much a part of our way of life, and your ability to understand how it works can be an essential body of information for you. This knowledge can help you to be far more successful than people who never take the time to learn. The rate of change in businesses is accelerating. It's the one unavoidable and inevitable fact of modern business life. Between 1980 and 1990 alone, 157 companies fell off the list of the 500 largest companies in America. More than 100 additional companies were either broken up, merged, acquired, or changed their major line of business. When we experience that much turbulence amongst the large